Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude BeyondMystic, and welcome to this deep woo-woo episode. Tonight's special, Secrets Revealed with Brice from Esoteric Atlanta. You can find her work, of course, here on YouTube at Esoteric Atlanta, and also on her new backup Rumble here at Esoteric Atlanta. We'll talk about that in a second. And finally, you can support her work at patreon.com. And there you're looking again for Brice at Esoteric Atlanta. Let's give her a big warm welcome to the show, Brice. Welcome to the BeyondMystic audience.
I'm so excited to be here. I'm really just thrilled. This is going to be a fun night, or fun afternoon, evening. So
right. Well, I'm excited to have you as well. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on this live interactive show. We'll take your comments as we go along during the show, and we might have time for questions maybe at the later end of the show here as we go deep into a specific topic of interest to mine and also to our audience. Before we start, I got to let the audience know, Brice, I've been trying to contact you for a couple of months. I've been wanting to have you on the show. And of course, as universe would have it, you and I have extremely busy inboxes. And of course, my email went into your spam, your emails went into my spam. So we couldn't reach each other up until just last week. And it's funny, the night before, Janine and I were saying, wouldn't it be cool if we got Brice on the show? We want to do a deep dive or something. And then that same day or the next morning, I found an email from you or a contact from you. I think maybe it was Instagram. I was like, wait, Janine, did you already talk to Brice? And she says, no, I didn't. What do you mean? She says, well, she's reaching out.
I think it's that new Earth telepathy, like spidey senses we're all downloading at the moment. So
right. I was just saying to Jenny, I said, maybe her ears were burning. I said, imagine that, how universe like times everything together. So it's absolutely fabulous that you're in now. And you know, I love your channel because when I started BeyondMystic, I wanted to basically explore everything you're exploring, the esoteric, the occult, all the weird shit, like what we call the woo here. And you're very much up my alley. So I thought together, imagine the things we could come up with here for the audience. I'm really excited for today's show. All right, let's start with this one. So folks, just so you know, in a couple of weeks from now, Brice, Janine, and I are going to be doing a show together, a very special deep dive show. And I think that's already scheduled for October 12th. I'll show you guys the poster in a minute. Before we do that, though, I thought it would be important for me to interview Brice individually to kind of get to know her and to showcase her many, many talents and avenues of knowledge for you, the audience. So let's start here with the first time guest question on our show. And it goes like this, Brice. How did universe conspire to bring you to the work you're doing today?
How did it not conspire? I think for most of us on this journey, even for everybody watching, I always say it doesn't matter if you have a channel or not. Everybody watching, you're on the battlefield with us, right? So I think there's been many things that have happened in our lives that have led us to this point, you know. And for me, I always kind of called myself a bit of a weirdo. I was always attracted. Actually, I've been using your word, the woo-woo. I've been more attracted to that as a child. And I'm from the Deep South. And anybody from the Deep South can tell you every house here is haunted. We got ghosts everywhere. You know, my mama growing up, she was a conservative Christian, but she told me my first ghost story. Scared the crap out of me. And so when you grow up with that, you're always kind of a little bit enchanted by the mystical side of life. And then, of course, I think for a lot of us here on the earth right now, we were put here for a specific reason. And I think we're learning that the woo-woo, the mystical stuff is actually more real than the stuff that we were taught was real, if that makes sense. We're starting to understand there's these secrets in life, these mysteries to life that have been mysteries to us because we were not let in on the secret. But it still revealed itself in its time. And it's an honor to be here on the earth, even though it's stressful right now. But we know everybody's exhausted. We're exhausted too. But we all, it's an honor to be here and to experience the changes that we're going through as humanity. And so one of my I know we're going to talk about this tonight, but one of the biggest things that really kind of slapped me across the face and woke me up was bloodlines. And stuff that had happened to me in my life, and then led me down a rabbit hole to study all the blood types and all the bloodlines. So
I'm excited about that. So I have a whole line of questioning for you on that very topic. And my audience knows that it is a topic of mine as well, especially the Rh negative bloodline per se. There's a lot to that yet to discover here for humanity. So I'm excited to dive into that this evening. But before I do that, so talk about these secrets. Okay, you have tons of videos for people to go look at, and your range of topics of how you do your research is absolutely phenomenal. So folks, if you don't know who Brice is yet, go ahead and click subscribe on this YouTube channel here and start diving into this. You can binge watch this for months. There's so much stuff there. That's absolutely amazing. So let me bring the link down in the chat. There you go. It's on the main screen for you guys. So you can just click on it and go and subscribe. Now, I want to dive a little bit deeper. You went a bit too fast there as to how universe conspired. So let's backtrack to when you were a kid. Now, you said that your mom gave you that first ghost story. But did you, even before the ghost stories, feel maybe out of place, out of time? Did you feel that perhaps you had visitations when you were a young person? Let's share that with the audience a little bit, because a lot of them have those commonalities. So I'm curious how you tie into all of this.
Yeah, so we always grew up with the understanding that, you know, like I said, my mom is her family's from the low country of South Carolina, very old cities for America. I know for our Europeans watching, they're not that old, but for America, especially here in the Deep South, a lot of stuff has happened on this land. And so there's a lot of held energy. So I always, as a child, I think most kids in the South kind of grew up feeling, seeing, and knowing things that they couldn't give words to. And so, like I said, my mother told me my first ghost story, but growing up, I always felt things. And my third, fourth, and fifth grade year in the school that I went to, the third, fourth, and fifth grade were in an old plantation house. And I'll have to be careful about the words that I say this. And I think people watching understand the kind of the terms of service we're under on this platform.
Right.
During the American Civil War, the troops from the North that came through the South had this propensity, not all of them, to kind of come onto private property and do just bad things to the families that lived there. Some of these families were just women that were left, that were innocent, that were just kind of there. And that the plantation house that housed the third, fourth, and fifth grade had that happen to that house during the Civil War. And it was actually Sherman used it as one of his headquarters. And one of the girls that lived at the house in the 1860s was a young teenager, which, you know, and she was off the banister by one of the Union soldiers. And so we as children would actually see that in the school a lot. And it was a small private school, and this was in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, so very different times that we're talking about. So like I remember in like third, fourth, and fifth grade, like if you like had a little bit of a cold and your mom would write a note to your teacher to keep you inside for recess so you don't get sick, you would like beg your mom not to do that because you didn't want to be left inside of that house by yourself while the teacher and the kids were outside playing. You don't want to be in there by yourself. And like in the fifth grade, we got to go up into the attic and see where there were like holes in the walls from this thing, from the, you know, the beginnings of the, you'll know what I'm talking about, the big ones from the Civil War. And, you know, and so you got to go see that. And so I think from a very young age, for a lot of people that grow up in this particular environment, you're always kind of put in a situation where you are feeling the pressures coming from across the veil, especially with untouched energy. Now, like I said, I grew up conservative. Down here in the Deep South, we have like two different competing cultures. You have the fundamentalist cultures, like the evangelicals that are very, you know, not so nice and very like live by the Bible so strictly that it becomes almost impossible to. Anyway, we have that culture, but then we also have the culture I grew up with, again, Christian home, but there was a lot of legends. We were told stories about the Georgia werewolf and like, you know, all the ghosts of South Carolina and Georgia. And, you know, there was more folklore involved into that as well. And of course, my mom being from the Low Country, we have the Gullah, the Geechee, which is very much like the Haitian voodoo down in New Orleans. So you have that culture that you're exposed to and are used to growing up down here. And so that kind of, I think, preps you a little bit coming into this world that we're in now. But when I was in high school, I always felt, like I said, I always felt a little bit weird. But when I was in high school, I got really, really, really sick. It was like my sophomore year of high school. So for those who don't know, that's 15. If you're from another country and do it, it's about 15 years old. I woke up one morning and I had these like lymph nodes all over my body, just swollen. And to make a long story short, my mother brought me to the doctor. They couldn't find anything wrong with me. My body temperature over the course of a few months dropped down to 92. I was in and out of the hospital. Would wake up with just scratch marks all over me. I would wake up and then like screaming, and my parents I couldn't get up. My parents would have to come like hit my arms and my legs to actually get my body going, and kept taking me back and forth to the hospital. I had all sorts of tests done, spinal taps, testing for diabetes, anything they could test me for, they did, and all came back negative. And over time, I just got better. But after that, something really shifted inside of me, like big time. I started seeing a lot of like entities, if you will, like the shadow men, the red eyes, the hat men. I had seen angels as a little.
Hold on. Did you say the hat man?
The hat man. Yeah.
Me too. Okay, keep going.
Now that one's one of the most freaky.
Oh yeah. Mine was like a top hat, like those, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I started like seeing more of that. And I will say, when you can see beyond the veil, as I've learned, entities that are good, like if you guys are familiar with the Bible, anytime an angel appeared to a human being, the first thing they say is, don't be afraid. The good entities do not want you afraid.
Yeah.
Bad entities, they feed off of that.
Yeah.
That's what feeds them. And so when you start seeing more of the bad stuff than you do of the good stuff. And so I kind of ignored it for a really long time, and I kind of let it go. Just did my thing, went to India, I go back and forth to India studying yoga before all of this stuff happened. We went back and forth. We opened up a yoga. My boyfriend has a yoga shala, opened up my own shala. Then with this thing happening that close, so now we just work on his. And so things kind of, my boyfriend's a little bit woo-woo too, so we kind of meshed well together. And then one day I was telling my boyfriend about my experiences in high school and how no one ever knew what was wrong with me. And I had a couple of card readings and stuff like that where they had said that was something very spiritual that happened to me. There was something, it wasn't, even though it manifested physically, it was something very spiritual. Well, over time, my boyfriend kept looking at me and saying, he had been awake for a while, and he had been kind of studying these bloodline families. And he had seen a post about all these traits for people who are Rh negative. And he was reading them off to me, and he was like, this is all of you. And so he was like, what's your blood type? And I was like, I don't know. And so I called my mom, and my mom was like, yeah, Rh negative is in our family. And so I got my blood type. I knew I am Rh negative. So then I started researching more and more and more into the Rhesus Negative. And I know that my great grandfather was born into the English royal family. And his daughter was basically sent to America, broke free. But my grandfather would talk about that. And he was a surgeon, and he would say things like certain physicalities that we inherited from that particular family. And so I started putting all these things together, and I was like, oh my God. Oh, they told us all this time in the history books, it's a bloodline. They've told us this. And now I think I'm starting to get it. They are looking for particular qualities in that they see as like pure. Now, with that being said, that's what they see. That's not how I see it. So after I studied my own bloodline, and everything, all of a sudden, everything just made sense. It made sense. I was like, I inherited this. And I think what happened to me in high school was what would typically happen to somebody in these bloodline families, where they learn how to do certain things. I don't know what I can say, but they learn how to use abilities that is in their blood. Now, your blood is your sacred genetic coding.
Okay, don't go too fast. We'll get into all that. I'm excited. I know, I'm just as excited as you to have this conversation. Okay, hold on. So first of all, you're getting a lot of love in the chat. So thank you everyone for encouraging Brice and welcoming her here to our Beyond Mystic family. You guys in the chat are absolutely amazing. I love you guys. Okay, so for this topic tonight, I've been perusing some of your content here for a while, but this video here I thought was fascinating, at least maybe the first part of this before you get into the doshas, but the first part relates to the RH blood groups here. So I'm going to send that link down to the live chat for the audience. You guys can go and watch this after this episode. It'll give you a little bit more context for the conversation here tonight. Now, let's just go backtrack a little bit here to maybe some of these visitations. I'm curious about, so I'm guessing this was somewhere between, let's say, 5 years old and maybe 20 years old, or maybe 15 at the offset. What was the time frame?
Well, as I got older, I got really good at ignoring them.
Right.
And like just kind of, you're in my 20s, I lived in Los Angeles, so I was always out doing stuff, and you kind of let it, it's weird, and so you just kind of leave it. Now, the most powerful positive visitation I think I ever had, my grandmother, my mother's mother, I was really close to my mother's mother, and she passed away when I was 8, about to turn 9. And that was the first time as a child. I think most children go through this. My grandmother had died before that, but I don't think I had processed it because you're so young. You don't really know what that is. Right. But I remember that. But when my grandmother passed away, it really hit me hard. Like, I remember all of a sudden understanding mortality. And like, I remember not wanting my parents to leave the house. I didn't want to be separate because it just scared. I just very, this was the late 80s, early 90s. So, maybe today parents would have handled this differently than they did then. But I definitely it was like probably one of the first, maybe not red pills, but black pills that you take as a kid, where all of a sudden you realize things are not permanent. And I remember one night I was laying in my bed and I was really upset about my grandmother not being here anymore. And on top of that, there was simultaneously, I was always a little bit afraid of the dark because I saw things in the dark. And my parents used to leave the hall light on for my sister and me. So because of that, and our doors would be open, but that night the hall light had been turned off. And so, when you're emotional about something, sometimes it can intensify other emotions, right? And so I remember, like it was yesterday, being in my bed and upset about my grandmother, and also upset about the hall light not being on, and thinking, should I go turn the light on, or will I get in trouble if I go turn the light on? And I just decided that I'm going to go get in the bed with my little sister. And so I got out of my bed and I went around the hall to my sister's room, and I got in her bed with her. Now, in this time, the style for some kids' bedroom, was to do something called sponge painting. I don't know if you guys know what sponge painting is, but you take a sponge, so it creates these different shapes on the wall. My sister had it was turquoise sponge painting. And so I got in her bed and I turned my back to the door that was open, and I could see the designs on the wall, the sponge painting designs. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this bright light comes slowly through the hall. And I remember seeing the reflection dancing kind of on the sponge painting. And my first initial thought was, oh, somebody turned the light on. But then it got so bright, even though my back was turned to the door and I was watching the wall, it got so bright I had to close my eyes. But it immediately filled me with peace. And then it passed down the hall. Well, then a couple seconds later, I hear my dad run down the hall after the light. And I didn't say anything because I didn't want to get in trouble. I was at peace, but I didn't want to get in trouble because I'd snuck into my sister's room. So I just kind of stayed there. Well, the next day, I was playing in my room. And this, again, was before cell phones. This was back in the dark ages. And we had a telephone in the hallway on a table that had a cord on it. So if we got anybody young watching, this was like dark ages where you had to sit there and talk. You couldn't actually move from the phone. So my mother we had no caller ID, who was calling you. You just took a gamble every time you picked that phone up. My mother was on the phone in the hall, and she was chit-chatting with one of her friends. And she was saying, and I was playing. Yeah, there you go.
We had one of those in my house too. Oh my God. And just for the audience here, this is the sponge painting she was talking about. So some of the designs.
Yep, there you go. That was also old ages. Old. Actually, maybe we should bring that back. I don't know. Maybe kids would like that in their room now. But yeah. I was playing in my room, and again, for the young people watching, we had no internet. We had to actually play with toys. Yeah. And I heard my mom telling her friend that the night before, she had been laying in her bed with my dad, and my mother was in like her mid-30s. She was younger than I am now when she lost both of her parents. And so that the gravity of that hits me now at my age. I'm like, crap, she was young. And she was laying in the bed, and apparently in her bed, she was also really, really, really upset about her mom passing. My dad was trying to comfort her, or her mom passing, and my dad was trying to comfort her. At the same time, I was moving to my sister's room because I was upset. Well, I remember my mom saying on the phone that a huge light appeared at her door and just stared at them. And my mother said all of a sudden she just got really peaceful, but it was like this angelic light. And it just stood there and stared at them. And then it turned around and went down the hall. And my dad got up and chased the light down the hall. And that's when I had heard it. And I heard my mom telling the story, and I ran out and I told my mom, like, I saw the light too. I saw it too. You know, please don't get mad at me for sneaking into my sister's room, but I saw the light too.
Right.
And honestly, when people tell you that the light that comes from that side of good, it's indescribable. You know, a lot of people say that when they try to describe the light that comes from angels or whatever you want to call it, from the side of positivity of God, it's not like any light that you see in our dimension of reality. It's just unbelievably beautiful. It's strong. It's hard to look at, but it's so peaceful. It's like this all-encompassing like hug that just generates just pure love. And so I really believe that God or the universe, whatever your name is for that all-encompassing love, allowed that to happen for multiple reasons, not just because of the passing of my grandmother, but also as I've gotten older and the valleys of the shadow of death I've walked through, I can lean on that because I know that even with all the stress, even with everything we're living through in this matrix, we are from that light. You know, in Genesis 1:3, where it says, God said, let there be light. In my studies, one thing I found as an English speaker, as my native language, when that verse is read to us, it just sounds like God created the sun and we could see, like turning a light on. But the original text, the people who heard that, the word for light meant divine spark. God said, let there be a divine spark. And that's a holy and beautiful anointment that every human being individually has with their creator, with source. And that's what these people want from you.
Exactly.
It's so precious. It's more precious than money. It's more precious than anything, that divine spark.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they don't tell us stuff. That's why they try to keep things in the dark from us. But you know, I just hope that everybody remembers that's special. But anyway, when you do one thing I do know from like the law of one, which is what my boyfriend really follows, is that when you are when you have made a conscious decision to serve the light and to serve the good, to serve others, the dark will send what they call petty tyrants to try to take you down. And so I know a lot of people who have stepped up in this battle have emailed me about it, that they're constantly getting attacked. They're constantly experiencing these energy drains. That's intentional.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see it as just means you're a threat.
Yeah.
You're doing a good job.
You're doing a good job. Exactly. You're right. Vision on the screen says, yes, it's all love. Speaking of the light. And as you were talking, I wanted to say, once you're touched by the light, even if it's just a millisecond, and you had a few seconds with it in your room there, and your parents too, but even for a second, you'll never fear the dark again, because you know how powerful the light truly is. And so I hope that some of our audience members have felt this already, or at least can take it from your experience here, that there is such a thing, and it's so very, very powerful. And we're much bigger because we're all connected to that light than perhaps these darker entities may be. Now, I did this interview with Penny Kelly a couple months ago. This was called ETs and Human Trafficking. And we talked about some of these entities and their plan to harvest what you just talked about here, this energy of ours. And this is the power source of us, the humans. And this will tie into the conversation tonight about the RH negative bloodlines as well, and how all that fits in. So folks, if you haven't seen that episode, I recommend you check it out, because again, it's the bigger, broader conversation that we as humans are supposed to have right now. If we stay low-lying in the right, left paradigm and all that, we're missing the bigger picture. That's a low-level con. We need to go a little bit higher to really, truly understand what's happening on our planet here. So, okay. Man, there's a lot there with that story. We could do a whole show on that story.
Well,
Of the light.
I also want to say too, for people who, because people ask me this question, like I carry the bloodline of like the royal family. I have the exact same blood type as, you know, the queen. That's not the blood types just give you personality traits and your DNA coding, but you have the free will to make the decision of what you want to serve and what kind of empathy and compassion you have. So I don't want anybody to be scared if they hear like, oh my God, I have Anunnaki blood or Draco blood or whatever. You still have free will, and God gave you the DNA and the genetic coding that you needed to do what you need to do in this life.
To accomplish your mission. Yes. In my notes for tonight, I have a, what do I call it? Battle group infiltration as a bullet point. So we'll get into that here and why they're choosing RH negative bloodlines. Okay, but that's a little bit further down the conversation. So let's build some track here, because for some people, this conversation has been brand new. And again, my channel is growing every day, and we're getting people who were watching CNN last week, and they're now fed up with all of that, and they're diving into the woo. So they're new to all of this. So let me start here, folks. First, I'm going to ask you guys in the chat, if you guys are RH negative, let us know. A, B, AB, or O. Let us know which one you are. And what's funny about that, I've had a few channels deleted here already. And in some cases, I had some tarot cards, some other psychics tell me, oh, JC, you're saying all these bad words. Of course, they don't like you. So that was one of the tarot readings. Another reading was, oh, JC, yes, there's that. But why they're really, really pissed off is because you're empowering the divine feminine. And this is the one thing right now that the controllers don't want, because it would bring this equilibrium back into the human consciousness field. So they don't want that. So of course, they're trying to disperse that. And the third reason I got was the group. They're trying to disperse our group, the community that we have. Because again, most of them are RH negative bloodlines. So you'll see by the answers here, it's going to pop up quite a bit. Okay, so let's start there. Brice, in your research, and I know people can go watch the video, but for the sake of this one and laying down some track, what are some of those really, really common traits that are found for the RH negative blood type people here on Earth?
So RH negative, if you're RH negative, that means that you don't have the Rhesus factor in your blood. And the first thing I want to say that made me kind of scratch my head and go, oh my God, what the hell did they teach us in school? If you're RH negative, you don't connect to the Rhesus monkey. So 15% of the world's population doesn't connect to evolution because we don't have it in our blood. So if 15% of us don't in the human species, then in my opinion, that means 100% of us don't, if we're all human beings, you know? So the Rhesus negative. So again, there, and I'm not a scientist. I'm not a chemist. I'm not any of that. So I'm giving you a very generic amateur look at this blood type, or what this blood is. So the Rhesus, now before the Great Awakening, the Rhesus negative, the most important thing we knew about the Rhesus negative, us as the 99%, not the 1%, the 99%, we knew that for me, since I'm a woman, since I'm RH negative, my sister's also RH negative, that if I were to get pregnant with a man who was RH positive and the baby was RH positive, I would have to have medical help to deliver the child. In the past, in the not so distant past, I don't know about where you guys come from in your countries, but people would get blood tested before they got married, so the doctors could tell them the likelihood of them being able to have a child. Because a long time ago, RH negative woman with an RH positive man, the likelihood of them having children, maybe they would have one, because the woman's antibodies would try to get rid of the baby because the blood sees it as the RH factor as a foreign substance, like a different species.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And so like my sister's husband is RH positive. One of her kids is RH negative, but two of them are positive. She now, because that's one of the good things with the Western medicine, is that they've been able to help women carry the babies to full term. And so two of her children were carried. She has 3 children, beautiful children, all healthy. So that's one good thing that we have now in our modern times. Well, so that's the big thing that we kind of talked about. For men, it doesn't really matter for men, because you can't, I know that the other side of this board game wants us to think that men can carry babies, but biologically, no. Sorry. So a man being positive or negative doesn't really matter. It really comes down to the woman and what the woman can do. Also, with like blood transfusions or organ transplants or anything like that, for my blood type, I'm the universal donor. Anybody can take an O negative, but I can only take an O negative. And so it's harder for me to receive blood because I have to take my specific blood type, but my blood type, because there's nothing in it, can go to anybody to support them. At this point, I wouldn't suggest giving, that to, I would just, because we don't know what they're doing with it, but if the person it's going to, that's good. But other than that, I would be careful with that. But so the qualities, so now we know that the blood doesn't have the rhesus factor in it. So some of the personality types, and this is just generally speaking, some people with Rh negative can have a few of the quality types, not all of them. So it's not an exact, just so you guys know, I pretty much have all of them. So typically it's mostly European people of European descent, so white people. This is because the blood is typically found to have originated in the Pyrenees Mountains. Now, there is a theory that people who are Rh negatives are left over from Atlantis. That when Atlantis was destroyed, they went up to the highest ground they could find, which was the Pyrenees, and stayed there until they were able to come back down. There's still a high concentrate of Rh negative. Typically, people who are Rh negative, you can be African descent or Asian descent. That is a possibility, but we know that the Rh negative started in Europe. So if you have that, if you are Asian or African and you Rh negative, you do have an ancestor somewhere that was of European descent. Most people have blue eyes or green eyes or hazel eyes, a recessive eye color. Most people who are Rh negative have either blondish, reddish, light hair. So I highlight my hair. My hair is naturally a little bit on the blonder side, but there is a little bit of red in it. If it's not highlighted, it's actually, I don't even know what my natural hair color is anymore because I've colored it for so long now. But you typically have, my resting body temperature generally is like 96. I told you guys when I got sick, it dropped to 92. It's very like what they call cold-blooded. My tongue is really long. I can touch my nose with my tongue. That's common. People with Rh negative have, the stigmatism, typically in their eyes. It's because in the back of the eye, not the circle, not the pupil, the back of the eye, it's like a diamond shape. And so a lot of people speculate that, and I have astigmatism, that the stigmatism they're diagnosing us with is actually our ability to see beyond the veil. But we see it as astigmatism because we see light or different, it's like we're not seeing what everybody else is seeing. So therefore there must be something wrong with us. We need glasses.
Right.
Interesting, right? And we typically have an extra vertebrae. I have an extra vertebrae of 34 instead of 33. Stomach digestion problems. It's almost like your body has a really, really, really hard time adjusting to the elements of this earth, which is very interesting. My boyfriend, it's funny, he used to make fun of me for that. He used to tell our dog all the time, he was like, Mama's gonna change into a lizard, just watch, just teasing our dog. And then I one day I looked at him, I was like, well, Todd, you have a lot of these traits as well. And so he got his blood tested and he's A negative. So he's also, and he's a redhead, he's also Rhesus negative. So
wow, that's fascinating.
So I was like, karma's a bitch. So
Libby's saying also as an extra trait here, apparently they can't be cloned. We can talk about that. And also resilience to some of the difficult and known created diseases here on the planet. Let's dive into that a little bit.
I've actually heard that as well. Before all this, because I started understanding this before the great event of 2020, we'll just say that. Yeah. And there was a great event that happened in the 80s. I don't know if we can talk about it with the A word. You know what I'm talking about. And I in my studies, I learned that Rh negatives, that's not an issue for Rh negatives. AID, you guys know what I'm talking about. So, and if you were alive in the 80s, you remember how much of a big deal that was. And we're pretty, but a lot of an interesting thing about the Rh negative is most of the royal family, all the royal families, which are pretty much one big family anyway. Most of them are Rh negative. A lot of
the presidents around the world.
Yep. I think all of our presidents have been, even Mr. O. And he's not, obviously his mother was of European descent, but it is believed, we look at the idea of like mind control is really fascinating to me too, because there's so many different degrees of it. We're learning more and more and more about how they've been able to kind of shepherd us sheep in a direction for trying to watch my words, guys. I'm sure y'all understand. This is not I have to tell people sometimes on my channel, it's not us. We don't want to have to like choose our words. This is just what we're working with. And sometimes when I'm talking to people off camera, I find myself calling Mr. T, and I go the cure, and they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh wait, I'm being filmed right now."
Okay, so hold on there just for a second here. Let me take a quick parentheses here for the audience. Brice just got a strike on her YouTube channel here yesterday or the day before for an old video she did on censorship. So of course, so this is why we were promoting also her Rumble channel here, folks. So let me bring that link down as well. If for some reason her YouTube channel gets another strike or gets deleted, knock on wood, hopefully that doesn't happen. At least we'll know where to find her here on Rumble. Now, of course, I'm on my third backup channel here on YouTube, and I've also got my Patreon deleted for all of this stuff. So I know. So the audience here is used to having us speak in code words, so don't worry about that.
It's like we're gonna have to just start miming at some point, because I mean, like at some point it's like how many things can't. Well, the interesting thing, I will say, this is a little bit off topic, but I will say this: I will on occasion go and watch like drama YouTube channels that are not, they're not in our community. They're all really in the 3D world, but just to see, and they're starting to get hit with stuff we've been hit with for a long time.
Yeah.
And so part of me is like, well, if the good guys are in charge, then maybe this is part of like waking them up to what's actually going on. Because if you're not in this and you don't see this, then how, because this, I don't want to live in a world where we have to deal with this. This should never, we should all be able to speak our own opinion. Even if they're really bad opinions, we should be able to say them. So
absolutely, the health of our nation depends on our ability to speak with each other uncensored. Serbian Mike is saying, yes, that's why people should join the Uncensored BeyondMystic site. And of course, when I lost my Patreon, Janine and I there were accused of inciting violence. Can you imagine? So we had to move everything and recreate here on our website. So now we have these pay-per-view episodes here where we can speak uncensored and freely. So if you guys want to check that out, you can find that at beyondmystic.net/pay-per-view. You can try before you buy. Most of the episodes are $1.99 per episode. And of course, if you want to have the Insider Access Pass, that'll give you access to everything and before everybody else. Okay, back to the show. So in these traits you were talking about, so we talked about the resilience to disease. We talked about not being able to be cloned, but there was something else about, what was the last one?
We have psychic abilities.
There's that too. Oh, yeah. Okay, let's expound on that, and I'll find the other one.
So I haven't, I do have weird psychic stuff happen, like what happened with you. And for example, there was a show I did with Janine, because I've been doing a deep dive on New Orleans and looking into these cities to see like what kind of, I love how Janine says dastardly. I'm going to start adding that into my vocabulary. Dastardly shenanigans that have been happening in some of these cities, probably in Canada as well, that we just have been clueless to. And so I asked Janine, we were talking about the House of Bourbon, which is the house that settled the New Orleans area and part of Canada, Quebec area too. So you have that connection with New Orleans. Yeah. And before we got to New Orleans, I was just asking some questions about the people who like founded it. And we started talking about the man in the iron mask. And I asked her a question, and then out of nowhere, I was like, oh, is this guy still around today? And it was like something had just come through me. And I feel like for us, I mean, a lot of RH negatives have psychic abilities. They're very intuitive. They are very empathic. But none of us in this 99%, whether you're RH negative or not, has been taught or shown or nurtured in using these abilities. Yeah. We're told there's something wrong with us. There's, my friend Tamara, who's down in the land of the kangaroos, because we can't say that country right now, but she's down in the land of the kangaroos. And she always says, what is your gut intuition? Your gut intuition does not make sense. Fear does make sense, but your gut intuition does not make sense. Well, they've been able to manipulate this and make us follow what makes sense, which is false evidence appearing real, right? Versus what our special intuit. They tell us we have 97% junk DNA. If you've seen the light that a lot of us have seen, that pure love light does not create junk.
No, it does not, of course. Okay, so you're just alluding to my next point here too, with respect to programming people. So you talked about MK Ultra. So what I've heard also is that people who are RH negative are harder to mind control. So again, if you look at the people maybe right now who are refuseniks, to call them that, again, a lot of those people are Rh negative. They're just not buying the bullshit, right? So there's something in their DNA and their makeup that for some reason can be cloned, the resilience to different diseases, of course, diseases that are meant to maybe further enslave the population. So you could tell there's a lot going on here. Okay, so I think we're far enough in the traits, and we're already, oh my God, 39 minutes in. Okay, we have so much to talk about here. So let's try to move it along. But let's talk about the origins. Now, in your studies, so you talked about the Pyrenees Mountains, and I brought this up for a reason here, the Basque region. So that's just between Portugal, Spain, France, and this area here. And so the Basque were found to have the highest incidence of Rh negative blood in any people in the world, significantly higher than the rest of Europe even, significantly higher than neighboring regions of France and Spain. 27% of Basque have Rh negative blood. Now, in some of the, what was this gentleman's name? Robert Seffer. He does a lot of these. He's an anthropologist, has a lot of great videos and books on YouTube. Go check him out. But he's also been diving deep into this Rh negative bloodline. And he also found some in Africa, which was actually very, very interesting as well. So it wasn't just Europe. And so, and again, there was a tie-in perhaps with Atlantis. So let's dive into that here, perhaps where these origins might be here on the planet and also off-world. Let's dive into that.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question because I know from my physical traits, they're very lizard-like, low body temperature, the long tongue, I can touch my nose, the long vertebrae, and you know, that's the royal family. That's what Diana called them. Now, again, as I've said, you just because you carry that bloodline doesn't mean you're like them. I mean, how many whistleblowers have come out of these families and walked away from them? That you have your own free will and your own choice. So, you know, that can be Anunnaki, that could be Draco. We know that, you know, I don't know if we can say the V word in Italy, the city in Italy. Is that okay?
People will figure it out.
Yeah. So the city in Italy and Rome, that starts with a V. That's Catholic. You know that means the head of the serpent. You see all we know what they are really about. And we also see it, and this kind of ties into the missing books of the Bible, which is another topic I've been diving into, because in the Old Testament, the books that would have been in the Old Testament that they axed, that they don't want us to read, talk a lot about our bloodlines. They talk a lot about the party substance that Janine, she calls it the part. I love it that, you know, they talk about that, not to do this because that is that's sacred genetic coding. They also talk about in the book of Enoch, and my friend Toronto, who did the Jesus strand with me, just sent me this from the book of Enoch. So we haven't covered the book of Enoch yet, that they actually talk about Atlantis in these missing books of the Bible. And that's kind of always been my interpretation of like what we have in the Bible and before, and that there's different timelines in that the stories that people are used to biblically kind of come after the fall of Atlantis. And from what I understand with Atlantis, and my boyfriend also believes this as well, is that they kind of were where we are now at this precipice of going right or going left, you know, and they went the way of darkness, where the elite, the 1%, they had all this technology. They were far more advanced than we are even now, but they had a certain elite group that kind of controlled it, and it destroyed them. And so from what the theory is that some of the leftover people knew that was coming. And so they went to the highest mountains they could find, the Pyrenees, and stayed there until everything was cleaned out and then came back down. So that's one theory that we have with the Rh negative. We also know that in the book of Enoch, it talks about the Nephilim, the Watchers, that there were, and the Nephilim were giants. So I'm not a giant. I'm only like 5'3", but we do see these, whether you think the Bible is all just metaphor or stories, it doesn't matter, because throughout all these old texts, we see these stories of people telling other people that these, what they called fallen angels, came down to the earth and mated with humans. This is in all these old stories.
Right.
So you have to kind of scratch your head and say, there's something there, especially if, you know, the city in Italy that starts with a V wants you not to read that and wants to keep it hidden in their library and not let you see it. So why are they, you know, people who have nothing to hide nothing.
Right. So just a sidebar here. You said the head of the snake, and of course, I'm just going to bring up this imagery for some of the audience members who don't know what we're talking about. Of course, it's right in the face, your face. The snake is right there.
Yeah.
That's absolutely incredible to me when you watch some of these designs in their architecture. I mean, they're telling you exactly what's going on. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. Okay, keep going.
I think a lot of us on this journey, and a lot of the audience probably gets this as well. Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
Once you wake up, you can't go back to sleep. It's so obvious. It's so obvious. And then you get mad because you're like, man, they've been like rubbing this in our face the whole time.
Yeah.
You know? And so you look at like their religion, the other side of this game, this board game, this movie, they worship Lucifer. Well, we know that Lucifer is often represented by a snake, right? Like the serpent in Garden of Good and Evil. There we have that idea of this reptilian. Well, in the Apocalypse of Abraham, which is another book that's been banned from the Bible, it's very telling. He talks about when man fell in this timeline, and he describes what he's seeing as almost like a Draco. Not like a snake like we're told in Sunday school or Vacation Bible School, little snakes living around the garden. It was like a Draco, a humanoid Draco. And reading that now, it's like, oh my God, they're telling us what happened. So this is very, very real. And I say to people all the time with this 1% in their religion, it's like, it doesn't matter, you know, what they're doing. So again, we go back to that light, the darkness, that side can't create. Only the light can create. We can create. So in order for the darkness to sustain its life, it has to take from the light and invert it. That's why we have all the things going on these islands. You know, the one island that was owned by a man named Jeff. You know, that's why we have things going on in that little grove up in California where, you know, bohemian people go. I'm trying to pick my words here. But, you know, all these things that are going on with children, it's because they need that spark. They need to give that spark to what they're serving, these actual real entities that they're serving that are very, very, very real, so that these entities can keep going. And it was easy for them for thousands of years now, because we had no idea. We just had no idea that's what was happening. So it was easy. But now that we know, it's like, oh my God, like this is unbelievable. And this has to stop. But that's why. Well, with the RH negative bloodline too, in my opinion, with the whole like mind, even though RH negatives have a harder time being mind controlled, if you're born into one of these families and you're taught, because reality is perception, right? So you're taught from a very young age that you're special and that you have these powers and you're not like the rest, and the rest are there to service you, and you're taught how to use these powers, then they can generate more wealth from themselves using the sacred DNA of RH negative. So I hope that makes sense if I explain that right. So that's why.
Yes, and I have a few additional points to bring to that in a few more segments down the line, and I think people will understand what we're talking about here. Okay, so let's backtrack. You said in Atlantis, they were kind of where we're at now, at that critical junction, and they chose basically the wrong side here. They chose poorly, as in Indiana Jones movie there, where the guy's choosing the chalice and he chooses the wrong chalice and he dies. Anyways, the old guard says he chose poorly. Right. Okay, so let's talk about Ascension now. We're at that same period here in time. I have these interviews with Sherry Divban on my show, and she does a lot of healing with young children, and she's connecting to their soul and their star families and all of this, and she's understanding now that a lot of these star seeds and often even warriors are dropping into these bodies right now. And I wanted you to connect for the audience how perhaps if we are living in this temporal war right now and we're at a critical point, it would make sense that if the elite here on the planet have all there's a whole technology, and this is a whole sidebar of another show. They reincarnate specifically in RH negative bloodlines to be empowered from those bodies. So let's move that aside for now. But if that is the case, and let's just presume for argument's sake here that that's the case, and there's a way for them to do that, you would think that the good side could also decide to say, hey, we could do the same thing here. We can drop into the negative bloodline bodies here on the planet so that we can fight toe-to-toe with the dark side. Now, let's explain that a little bit, because there's a common trait in a lot of these negative bloodline bodies in the fact that they can hold a higher charge. Let me explain that a little bit here. I'll lay down some groundwork for that for the audience to understand where we're going, and then we'll have the conversation. The higher blood charge goes to this. So let me see if I can bring this diagram back up here. So when you talked about the rhesus monkey blood type, right? This is a protein, and it's also called the D antigen. The only way for some, where is it? Okay, here. The protein that lives on the surface of the red blood cell. This is key. This protein that's living on the red blood cell basically is a crack. It opens up a hole in your blood cell. So if you think of your blood cell as a battery that's holding a charge, your force, your life force, your chi, your prana, your kundalini, whatever you want to talk it, if you have a hole in that battery is leaking. So we've explained on this show before that we live in this energy extraction matrix here on the planet. So it would make sense that if you were siphoning off the batteries, that you would plug into everybody's battery with this particular spike protein, if you want to call it that. That's not that. So I don't know why I said that. Okay, so now let's move in a little bit further here. They've shown us this. Let's see if I can find the other slide. They've actually shown this to us in the movie Star Wars. At some point here, this is Anakin Skywalker. He's being tested. And the guy says here, oh, I'm just testing your blood for any viruses to make sure you're okay for the thing you're about to do tomorrow. But really what they're looking for is these metachlorian counts, right? Mm-hmm. And they're talking about how the higher these metachlorian counts, the higher the energy this person can use. And then eventually master this energy to become a Jedi. Okay, so all this could be very directly connected to the Rh negative. So if the Rh negative doesn't have that gap, then you would presume that whether you want to call them metachlorians or whatever it is that's holding those energy cells within that red blood cell would be a lot higher than if you were leaking that energy. Yeah. So now let's talk about today. We're in this transition into the age of Aquarius. We're leaving the old age, we're coming into a new age, and we're having all of these amazing people dropping into these Rh negative bloodlines, as we can see from the chat here. These are not the royals, they're not the people who hurt children. They're on their side of the fence. So let's talk about that. What's your understanding of this fight right now, and why perhaps a lot of these starseeds are choosing these higher, and I say higher vibrational bodies simply because they can hold a higher charge, and with that, they have other abilities. And so these starseeds that are coming out now remember this coming in, whereas you and I, perhaps as kids, we weren't taught this, we didn't remember this because it wasn't time. But we're moving into this era of time now where this is unlocking for you, for me, and for the children who are actually leading the way, showing us how to use these abilities right now. Let's dive into that.
Well, I think I loved what you said dropping in. Because we are, where we are in our timeline right now, this has been, I guess we'll use the word prophesized in so many different spiritual texts. The Law of One prophesized about this time. The Bible prophesizes about this time, which the Bible is a totally different book than we've ever been taught. Now we're learning it's very, very different than what they taught us in churches, but the church is also part of the problem in a lot of ways. But astrologically, we know that we're coming into the age of Aquarius, the 1,000 years of peace. And I do, the Law of One that my boyfriend follows, it does talk about how we are living in third density bodies. But in third density in the Law of One, that's the density of both positive and negative polarity, where you as an individual have to make the choice of which polarity you are going to serve, service to self or service to others. So it matches the Bible completely. It matches all this stuff completely, just different language used to talk about it. Well, at this point, we're coming into what they call the harvest. And I know that sounds like a horror movie, like coming into the harvest, but it's because we are now at a precipice where not only are we as humans given the opportunity to come now into a fourth density positive earth, because once you get to fourth density, you have to either be positive or negative. You can't be both. And the earth itself, so the earth as a living breathing being to our planet, whatever that looks like, don't even know what that looks like anymore, but whatever the planet that you're standing on now is also transitioning as well. So it's not just you, it's everything around you is destined to go into this fourth density positive planet, fifth density consciousness, but a fourth density. Well, for this time on this earth, according to the Law of One, a lot of us that are here on the battlefield right now have already graduated into like fifth or sixth density, but volunteered, almost like the Hunger Games. I volunteer as tribute. We volunteered to come back into third density to help push the earth in this environment into where is destined to go, because we knew the battle was going to be extremely hard. According to the law of one, Earth is one of the hardest third density planets to be on. Like, we picked the Mac Daddy of like elite education when it comes to being on the Earth. Like, I don't want to say Harvard, because honestly, like, that's embarrassing, because Harvard, we know now, is not it's not, but you picked like the total like elite school of soul transfer. Like, you got accepted. Forget your SAT scores, forget your ACT scores. Your soul got accepted to come into one of the hardest, most challenging programs the universe could provide for you. And I think that's why a lot of us that might be wanderers that came, that's what the law of one calls us. We're wanderers. We came in from another density, or we've already graduated. We came back to help. I think that's why a lot of us picked to come into RH negative bodies, because maybe deep down we knew that we needed that equipment. It's like when you're going into a battle, if you're in the military, you have to have certain equipment for a certain area. We knew we needed that equipment. And even though when we came,
it's called mission specific equipment.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. And even when we came through, we obviously, you go through the tunnel of like forgetting. That happens to everybody. But I think as time has gone on, we're waking up, we're starting to remember. And when we hear the truth, it starts to resonate with us, like, oh, like once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Yeah. And so that's why I think a lot of us in this, and if you're RH positive, you still have certain abilities. Every bloodline, every single bloodline has something special about it. It's just for a heightened spiritual battle, you're going to stick RH negatives up in the front line, because they're the ones that are going to be able, they have certain a bit like A positives, for example. People who are A positive, they're the most grounded. They have such a connection to the earth. Like, they can actually kind of communicate with like earth spirit, whereas RH negative is more up, where they're more like coming in from it. I hope that makes sense. So I don't want to make it sound like the RH negatives are the only ones able. We're all working together. We're all where we go, when we go, we're all doing this together as a team. But I think that's why, out of this whole, and I think it's catching the bad guys kind of, I think it caught them a little off guard, because I think for all these thousands of years, they've been able to monopolize those bodies in that bloodline. And now they can't. We are going toe to toe. It's like, pick on someone your own size.
It's my understanding, and again, nobody told me this, and what I just told you about the blood and the battery concept, this is a deep knowing that I have. I don't know where I got it. It's one of those downloads, and if it's true, maybe it's not. So guys, take it for what it's worth. But it's one of those things that I have in my mind that just like, aha, it made sense to me that that's what it was. Now, what you just said about the maybe the bad guys being surprised here too. I think that at a certain point here, maybe 50 years ago, 60 years ago, in that time frame, something happened to their technology where they basically re-jumpstart their reincarnation. They don't go into the long sleep or the metempsychosis. They jump right back into bodies. And so again, we could talk about children and other stuff, but there's technologies that they use there. And about 50 years ago, I think part of that was broken, or part of that was taken away from them, from somebody else maybe, and I'm not sure. And so it kind of, it didn't necessarily flip the table, but it leveled the playing field, where now these starseeds, these drop-ins, these wanderers, these warriors, these absolutely warriors could come through and use these bodies as well. So now there's an equilibrium of this force working on the planet here. And I think once we start to really understand that, again, these are bigger conversations than the left-right paradigm. They're much higher. And we really need to step back and figure out, like, what is our role in all of this? And so, like you said, each and every one of us, whether you're positive or negative, we each have a critical role at this time. This is why we came here. So you need to figure out what that role is right now, if you don't know. Right now, because this is, she said the harvest earlier, but we're at that critical point here too. Okay, so let's talk about, well, the concept of battle group infiltration. I think we've kind of dived into it now, but let's talk about how that pertains to, man, how do I bring the subject up? Okay, so last year in my first YouTube channel, I got deleted because I was talking about Kundalini. And I was talking about using this energy, these technologies, to empower ourselves, but not just to empower ourselves, but to disconnect from the energy extraction matrix. And of course, this is what the machine does not want. It needs the batteries, right? So this is how I got in trouble in the first place. So in one of my first videos, this was a 4-part series. there was Richard Allen Miller, Kerry Cassidy, Penny Kelly, but I think it was Penny Kelly who said, learning how to master this energy is the last gate to freedom for humanity. That's how important Kundalini really is. And so if you look at the Star Wars, the midichlorians, all of this stuff, they're telling you it's in your face everywhere. And even if you go look at Wikipedia, they talk about the Jedi or the Jed Towers. Again, it's all about electricity or energy charge. It goes back to ancient Egypt. So us understanding our ability to harness this energy, disconnect from the stuff that's siphoning it from us, and then using it for our own creation in this new world that we want to create, that's the key right now. So what are your thoughts on that? How close are we as humans to understanding that? Because right now, Brice, just like you're getting strikes on your channel, there's also so not only is the machine preventing us from talking about it, but there's also residual programs that are within a lot of humans in the population. As soon as you say Kundalini, oh, there you go, JC's talking about porn again, or he's talking about sex, or whatever it is, right? And they get turned off right away. They can't, it's like, no, can't listen to that, can't listen to that. Yet it is the key to their own freedom. How do we deal with that right now to maybe capture another 5%, 10% of the population to really start paying attention to this for the sake of freedom, not for the sake of being all empowered and all enlightened? Yes, that's a good derivative, all of that.
But the most important thing is our freedom. Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny because, like I said, I hate to use the term in my real life because I feel like my YouTube is my real life too. I know, but off the internet, you know, my boyfriend and I have spent a lot of time in India, you know, having really diving deep into the study of what yoga is, where we talk about Kundalini yoga as well. And what we're talking about with the blood and with the body in this harvesting of energy, they have done a really good job of trying to convince us that our body is like, things just happen to our body. Like, you have genetic illnesses, whatever. It's not really something you can control, but that's not true. And when we learn how to harvest our own energy, if you think, I mean, you can sit and do exercises where you push your hand, you hold your hands tight, you can start to feel energy swirling in between your hands. And we have all these different vayus, these pathways that run through our body that carry energy. These are not things that you can see in an MRI. These are not things you can see in an X-ray. And we have these, with the Kundalini at the base of the spine, you have Sushumna, this nadi that runs up your spine. Again, you can't see it in an X-ray, but it carries that energy up the spine into what would be like your third eye. And for me, in my own experience through years and years and years of traditional yoga and really working on understanding this, when you start to really utilize your body and get to know your body and ground, it's almost like, in my opinion, in order to ascend, you have to ground down. You have to start to understand that you have all these, like the base of right in between your perineum, where Mulabandha is, where Muladhara is, where you have these locks. We've been taught, especially as women down here in the South, where we're all ladies, that this was not an area you wanted to talk about. And so there's fear. They've given us fear around these areas. And so, you know, if people are working on harvesting their energy and trying to utilize it for good, my suggestion for people to do to free humanity is tonight, you really get into your body, start moving your body, feeling this, starting to sit and just see if you can feel the energy running through you. Once you get acquainted with that, you have to meet it first. You have to actually be introduced to it first. Now, this can't be like a slow date. This is gonna be like speed dating. You got to get down and like really, but just sit for a moment, sit for 5 minutes with everything turned off. Go in a room away from your spouse, away from the kids, away from your dog. Just sit and just feel your breath. Remember, they're trying to right now. And the breath is your anointment from God as well. God breathed life into man and man stood up. See if you can feel your breath. See if you can actually feel the energy running through your body. Once you meet that and you realize that's in you, that's part of your sacred life force, I think that you will, as for my experience, you will start to naturally start to feel that power rising up within yourself. In the yoga scripture, it says that we have everything we need. There's nothing Patanjali says that, like, you have everything you need. Wow. What does that mean? We have everything we need. That means you have everything you need. There's nothing I can give you. There's nothing the government can give you. There's nothing your yoga teacher can give you that you can't. You have that. That's you. You have that. And they don't want you to know that, right? They don't want you to know that. So that would be my suggestion for people to start really speeding up, is to actually just ground down. And that will help you find your sovereignty too. You know,
I love it.
I asked Janine once because I've struggled with arthritis in the past, and ever since I started this journey on YouTube, my arthritis is just like gone. And I asked Janine, I was like, because we know in some of these scriptures, it does say that when we start to transfer into this new age, that our body will start to be able to do things like self-heal, like the light body, that it will start to be able to kind of correct itself. And so I asked Janine that question, and she got the card. She said, well, yeah, when you stand in the light and you stand in the truth, your DNA will resonate with that.
Exactly. The whole shift comes together. Okay, so let's talk about this. Seeing as you're studying in all of this, I did this episode with Solretta. This is part of where I got in trouble last year too, on the second channel actually. Anyways, it was called Raising Kundalini. It's on my pay-per-view now because we can't put it on YouTube. But we talk about this Yab Young position, but specifically the breath work here. And so this is akin to the toroidal field, right? So you're creating that toroidal field through exchanging the breath of both partners. Do you want to maybe get into that a little bit here? Again, maybe be careful on some of the words here, but just give people some generic practices that they can start at home to just, even with themselves, they don't need to do
so I practice, so the type of yoga that I practice is a very complicated, it's very hard. You need it physically, you would need a teacher to help you with the postures, not with knowing yourself. That pratyahara is something you have to do by yourself. Again, like with a partner or by yourself with breath work, so the breath, if we talk about the pattern of breath work in your field of energy, the breath also connects to your nervous system as well. So you can tell on a very kindergarten level of breath work, you can start to understand your own energy. Okay, so when you are in a state of fear, of panic, you have these different responses. We know fight, flight, freeze, fawn. There's all these different responses that your body, you will take in an anxiety-ridden moment, but you'll feel heightened energy, but it will actually drain you. And so my suggestion with understanding the field of work, especially with other people, if you're working on your own, I would be to start recognizing when you're holding your breath, when you're breathing freely, and when you feel that anxiety rising and the breath starts to hold, force yourself to calm the breath down so that your nervous system takes that appropriate response so that you can own that energy again. As far as doing it with someone else, that probably would not be my specialty of understanding because my practice is so independently just solo. But yeah,
that's still very good. And what you just described is what we do in Kung Fu as well. So just before battle, as you're getting into these nerves, whether you're doing a skirmish or a training, your body wants to react a certain way, and your breath can actually control your body. So if you control your breath, your body follows exactly that same frequency.
Yeah, my teacher in India will, when you're practicing with him in India and you have this like crazy posture he's trying to get you to do, and you're like stall it, because the way we do it is not lead classes. He works people independently. He'll look at you and be like, why fearing? Why fearing? So that's kind of become my mantra now. Whenever I feel my anxiety rise up, why fearing? What's being triggered? And what that trigger, okay, let me breathe into that. What's the worst thing that's ever going to happen to any of us? The worst thing we can think of that's ever going to happen to any of us is how can I say this? We leave our earth body. We leave the earth plane, as Janine says. And we know, as people who have a belief in a bigger life, we know that that's not the end all be all, right? So why fearing? You were put here I know it's exhausting right now. We're all tired. We all want the thing to flip already, but you are so strong. They fear you so much. That's why they're doing everything. That's how scared of you they are. So
that's why they're forcing you and coercing you and lying to you and of course.
Yes, because they're terrified of you. You don't have to be scared of them. They're scared of you.
Exactly. Oh, I love it. Brice, okay. I think this is a perfect place to stop on this first introductory show. People just got an amazing taste of who you are, your depth of knowledge, your energy. Everybody in the chat's like, oh my God, I love her energy. I'm like, me too. I love it. Okay, so let us know here, Brice. So first of all, folks, we will come back with Brice here I think it's October 3rd, actually. No, let me bring that up.
I believe.
October 12th. So let me bring up that poster for you guys. So you can go and set that. Okay, so yes, Secrets Revealed with Brice and Janine. It will be October 12th at 4 p.m. Eastern. Let me bring that link down to the chat. So that will be a special episode. We might get into some MK Ultra stuff here with you. I think Janine and I have been looking for a partner to get into those topics too. So that could be fun. But anyways, we might make it a mixed bag for this show. So folks, mark your calendars for this one. In the meantime, is there anything coming up on your YouTube channel as well that you'd like to point to the audience?
channel won't have anything coming out for another week.
Oh yeah, that's right.
But the funny thing is I did have some videos I'd pre-filmed that I put on my channel that still look like they're scheduled to drop. So you guys, there might be a couple new videos dropping this week, but if they don't, they'll drop on Thursday of next week.
Or on Rumble.
On Rumble. Yeah, we're still deep in our deep dive into New Orleans, which has been super, super fun. I like looking at old cities and seeing like where, you know, Janine read New Orleans, their lane lines there. There's always more. That's what's so fascinating about this Great Awakening too. Once you go through like the depression of understanding what's been happening, once you move through that,
right,
it's interesting. And I love history. So it's interesting to go back and actually re-look at history, because we know we've been lied to about a lot. And so I've done different cities. It was heavily requested I do New Orleans. So we've done vampires, we've done all sorts of stuff with New Orleans, Mardi Gras, we worked on Mardi Gras, all that kind of stuff. We love New Orleans. We're still there. We're still working on Delphine LaLaurie and some of these interesting stories that have come out of New Orleans. Eventually people have asked me to look into this American continent that both JC and I are on, even though we're in different countries, we're on the same continent, that they tell us that us Europeans only came at a certain date, but apparently there's Roman architect that they found here, as well as Egyptian mummies. So that's another subject I'm going to be jumping into it.
I want to get into that with you as well, because I have another guest on my show who's quite deep into the Egyptian history in the Grand Canyon, and that's like a whole other show. Okay.
Yes.
Very cool. And of course, with all of this censorship, we need your support, guys. We don't exist without you. So, Brice, how can we support you here on your Patreon? Tell us about these different programs you have, and where can we point you out into?
Yes, I have a Patreon. I do for the top Patreon is for you actually become a producer on the channel. And so basically I run it like you would a TV show. If you want to be a producer, I will help you. I will promote your business on the channel, all that kind of stuff. Most of my producers are so kind. They're like, no, just do your thing. Then the next level, you get to recommend certain subjects you want me to look into and do a deep dive for you. The low level is just a tip for the channel. Unfortunately, with the middle tier, there have been some suggestions I've had to ask them to find another suggestion because the situation we're in. So, and I tell them once everything flips, then we'll go back and cover some of these stories that are very scandalous. So,
right. Okay. And just so you know, folks, this is the $10 one. I'm showing up on my Patreon account, and it's Canadian dollars here. So it's actually $10 for the middle tier and $25 here to be the producer. That's absolutely amazing. So here, I put the link down in the chat, guys. Please do go and support Brice here. As you can see, she's got so many cool things. Again, much better than paying for Netflix. I mean, this is where the woo is at. Definitely on Esoteric Atlanta here on her Patreon.
I'm just glad there's other weirdos out there that like this stuff too. You know, I didn't think anybody would listen to me when I put my channel up. I was like, no one's going to listen to this. But I just love everybody and these stories, people write in the comment section and they bring up, it's amazing. Like, I feel like we are working together because I'll present these stories, but then I can't wait to read the comment section because so many people point out stuff that I missed.
Yeah, me too. It's like an army of researchers, and we're all work. Oh yeah, I love it. I know.
So I feel like I share my channel with everybody because honestly, like, I appreciate my subscribers so much. You guys, I feel like we're on the same team. We're all I mean, it's amazing. Everybody who's watching, you guys are just all amazing, and I love you guys all so much. You're awesome.
That's awesome. Well, I love you, Brice, and I love the community. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And Brice, let me give you this opportunity here to maybe give the audience some last words of wisdom before we let you go. Anything that's striking your mind right now, either that you had prepared before the show or that maybe came into your field, because of course, everybody here in the chat is also psychic and they're leaking their information to us in the live stream. So anything you want to share with them before we go today?
I would tell you guys to obviously hold the line, be patient. If you feel like you need to like scream, do it. Just go in your car, do it. If you, my boyfriend went through a therapy session once where the therapist gave him like a plastic baseball bat and a dog bed if you got to do that, just don't take it on other people. Get the negative energy out any way you can so that you could be calm and fresh. If you got to cry, but just know, I mean, we know it's coming. We don't know when it's coming, but it's coming. So just hold the line and know even if you're out there and you feel alone, you're not alone. We're all there with you in spirit. So just love to all you guys and hold the line. It's the best is yet to come.
Perfect. I love it. All right, guys. Please subscribe to my channel here, of course, my third backup channel. If you're just finding me now through Brice's promotion of this episode, please do come and check out our amazing videos. And including tonight, we have the Quantum Woo with Mariam Henin. So you're going to have a lot of fun with that. That's going to be at 8 o'clock Eastern. Oh, this one here. And tomorrow also, Indigo Angel is back on the show for a galactic download. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely amazing. I was preparing the slide deck yesterday for this show, and you guys are going to be blown away. So check that out. And of course, on Monday, Catherine Edwards, yes, coming back to the show for the World of Enchantment. Always love to have Catherine on the show. And finally, next week, also Simulated Reality with Solreda. This is number 17, I think, or 18. 18 there. So there's a lot in that episode as well for you guys. So please do remember to like, share, and subscribe. I love you guys. And this was the first of many, hopefully, Secrets Revealed with Brice at Esoteric Atlanta. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night. I'm Jean-Claude BeyondMystic, and au revoir.